Thanks for being here. Subscribe to Cheating Stories Best, so you don't miss new stories.
It's only been 2 years since we opened the 800-square-foot bookstore and coffee shop on East Yale Street, our city's main street. My wife's best friend walked into the store one evening in June and asked if I could talk to her alone. Ruth was an indigenous woman and a member of the church where I served as the lead pastor. After pouring us both some strong coffee, we sat at a table by the side of the road to talk. "David, please turn off your cell phone because we need to talk about a personal situation that you don't know about. Maria has been talking about and planning divorce for a long time. It will happen soon, as she believes that the store can now provide for her," Ruth said seriously. I left the phone on the counter so the staff could answer it. "Please explain why you think that," I asked. "Is she having an affair?" "No, as far as I know. But she spends a lot of her free evenings with a few of your single tenants. She's made a lot of new dubious acquaintances over the past few months. I doubt any of them are aware of her ongoing mental health problems ever since her first nervous breakdown. I've noticed a change in her personality, so I can't say she's not cheating. But more importantly, I don't know her anymore," Ruth explained sadly. "Why do you think so?" I asked, seeing the concern on her face. "Ever since you opened at this location, a group of us church women have been meeting here regularly for coffee, and during these meetings, Maria has spoken about things that make me question your continued attitude. She has made it clear that she never planned to marry you," she replied. I knew she was telling the truth. My thoughts wandered. I flew to New York, arriving at the end of my first day of work just in time to join the dating party. There was a free bar there, so I was drinking double brown cows when I noticed Maria's eyes on me. Standing next to her where she was sitting was an older alpha male who was trying his best to get her attention. She wore a tight red dress that showed off her slender figure, ending about 2 inches above her knees. Her dark blue, ruby lips, and long shoulder-length brown hair enhanced the natural beauty of her face. Her smile seemed to light up everything around from my point of view. It seemed that all her curves were in the right place. My friend noticed my interest and stated that she was someone he wouldn't kick out of his bed if she showed interest. I laughed and replied, "Be careful because this is the girl I'm going to marry." After joking around with him, I walked over and sat next to her as soon as a seat became available. As soon as the alpha male noticed our mutual attraction, he left looking for new victims. We talked for hours and agreed to meet for dinner on Wednesday night. After a pause, Ruth continued, "Maria told us how you pursued her despite the great distance between you. At first, she thought it would pass quickly, so she played with you while she was looking for a rich man. She wanted to marry an older, rich man. You were 5 years younger. The problem was your persistence. Everyone was amazed by it. Maria admitted that your moral qualities were higher than everyone she knew. This irritated her because when things got tense between you, you stopped without crossing the line. Even though Maria told you that she was not a virgin, you still stopped and went to take a shower. She said that your explanation was that until you understood where your relationship was going, you did not intend to move on. It was this standard that made her compare other men who courted her to you. She said that they all seemed below par. The more you courted her, the harder it was for her not to fall in love. Regardless, no matter how much she denied it, all her friends saw that you had won her heart. In the end, she had to admit that she fell in love. It reminded me of a lot of good times, 16 hours from my house to hers. Huge bills for long telephone conversations on both sides added up to a large sum. From the day we met until our wedding day, we only saw each other 7 times, 6 of which were long weekends. We shared a common bond as we both grew up in troubled families. Her mother fled during the Hungarian Revolution with Maria. After living in Paris for a year, they came to the United States. Her father died in prison because he was a member of the resistance. Maria was the eldest of 6, each of whom had different fathers, 4 brothers and 1 sister. She was sent into foster care as a teenager because she looked too much like her mother. Their characters are so similar that they could not find a common language. Mary's main problem with you, Ruth said confidently, was that she couldn't get you to go to bed with her. This, like you, found herself in financial straits because of the distance. This pushed her to say yes. She was very proud of your appointment as a junior pastor and tried to be a good pastor's wife, but she missed her old carefree life. For 3 years, you moved from a small apartment to a 4,400 square foot house that you could call home. She worked alongside you while you redecorated room by room. Then, in your 4th year, your first son was born. You wanted her to become a stay-at-home mom full-time. 6 years later, you had your second. Maria felt overwhelmed and trapped because she never wanted children. She believes this caused her first nervous breakdown. I was completely shocked. I asked myself if I was blind. I tried so hard to give her the lifestyle she wanted that I didn't notice what she was saying or trying to explain. Was it really my fault? Maria says you annoy her with your refusal to argue or speak in anger. It's not normal, she says, for a man to move away to calm down. She claims it proves you're not a real man because you won't punch her. You know that every man who was involved with her mother was aggressive. Maybe that's why Maria sees you this way, Ruth said honestly. Ruth, Maria grew up in a broken home. I grew up in a family where my parents could be considered controlled alcoholics. If you hadn't seen them sober, you would never have known they were drunks. There were times when they drank to the extreme. I remember hiding under the bed because of their loud screams. At such moments, everything that one did to the other, no matter what, would come up and be compounded to cause maximum pain and suffering. We learned young that there was no forgiveness or love. The only reason they stayed together was because they refused to give up their children, I replied. When I was 10, my older sister got married in the summer, and my father's best friend, the alpha male, moved in with us due to very bad winter weather that same year. They worked in the same factory but on different shifts. The factory worked 3 shifts of 8 hours, 7 days a week. When one was on the day shift, the other was on the night shift, so they didn't see each other much. I shared a bedroom with him because we had 2 beds. One night, I woke up to find my mother and him making love. When I found the courage to ask her about it the next day, she denied it had happened and accused me of lying. I explained, so to protect her secret, she had to destroy me. From that moment on, my life became hell. I caught them several more times, and the product of their relationship was my little sister. My father began to drink even more to drown out his tears and pain. I think he didn't see himself as a man anymore, I continued. I made a promise to myself long ago to never speak out in anger. The reason I never slept with Maria was that I was trying to decide whether she was worthy of being the mother of my children, I said. Ruth looked at me as if she was seeing me again and asked if Maria knew about this. I told her not until James, my second son, was born. Her female psychiatrist called me for several sessions. Then I found out that Maria blames me for her mental problems. After several such sessions, she told me that she might never be able to make Maria understand that it was not my fault. This doctor also said that my childhood influenced my worldview and life path. As you know, Ruth, her mental health problems have been severe. She's had 4 breakdowns in the last 10 years. I'm starting to believe that maybe Maria's doctor was right, I said. Mary's love has turned to hate because in her eyes, I am the cause of all her mental problems. You're not the problem, David, Ruth said firmly. I told her to look at what you've accomplished as her husband since you got married. She had to admit that you started this business just to get her out of the house. For years, she didn't even leave your front door. You started this store at a flea market, setting up an 8 feet by 8 foot bookstall. As her confidence grew, you expanded the store, eventually turning it into a real business. As if rewarding her for her significant improvements, Ruth stated, now she's claiming you built it to lock her out. She's not giving you any credit for what you did. I remember when you rearranged the stock in this place by changing the product layout. It caused your sales to double. She humiliated you for weeks until she saw results. She said it was the best thing she ever came up with. The problem was, she said it took her months to get you to do it. My life was falling apart in front of me. It brought back memories of the first time I brought Maria to meet my parents. I called my father to ask if they would be home at the time I planned to arrive. He said yes. Are you coming, stranger? Are you going to get married? I answered yes. This was the second time I had come home in 9 years. I ran away from home at 16. I managed to get through school working fast food. They were on their best behavior while we were there. We finally found the wedding rings we wanted and got engaged in a shopping center parking lot that night. My father warmly welcomed Maria into the family. He said, "Son, you went fishing and caught yourself a good catch. Maria, welcome to the family. Don't you know that the bad ones should be sent back?" It made me wonder if I've been a fool all my life. "Ruth, why are you telling me all this tonight?" I asked. "David, Maria is about 8 weeks pregnant, in case you didn't know. It doesn't look good. She started withdrawing from her longtime friends who are church members a few months ago. I don't want to be the middleman. As a result, I've cut ties with her," she said. I wasn't surprised. In her anger, she accused me of sleeping with you on the side. I got so angry that I punched her in the face. She just laughed. I warned her to get her head out of her, otherwise she will lose a good man, Mary said. What good man, David? Is as blind and stupid as his father. His head is so far up his that he won't understand anything until it's too late, Ruth said with tears. David, I'm afraid it may be too late. Is there anything else I should know about? I asked. For years, I put the needs of my wife and children first. I saw where it took me. I was hurt but relieved, only that your lines of communication were compromised. Not only here, but at home and even at church. I saw printouts of actual conversations you had in the church office, Ruth explained. She has someone who does it for free. Maria showed me part of a chat you had with Bill Johnston about his preferences. I turned pale until she mentioned it. I had my doubts. If Bill's preferences had become known, he and I would have been kicked out. The elders would be forced to clean house due to loss of trust. Questions flooded into my head. I wondered if I was now facing what my father had faced. Was I too harsh with him? Did I react the same way he did? Ruth, I love you like a sister and I want to thank you for the courage you had to come through with all of this, I said with complete sincerity. Do you know how advanced her planning is? Those who are helping her begin organizing the divorce papers. They plan to involve the church, social services, the police, and the courts. They believe that by hitting you fast and hard on all four sides at once, they can disorient you. The more hits you receive, the less likely you will be to understand everything, Ruth said sadly. Thanks for giving me the edge. I just hope that when this is all over, we'll still be friends, I said with a smile. The rest of the week was quiet, except for a few hours on Friday. I noticed that my soon-to-be ex-wife was looking at me with bewilderment. It seemed like every time I left the store, my cell phone was left behind. I used that time to check if everything Ruth had told me was true. It was. Like that, I contacted my lawyer to start working on this. Sometimes the best attack is a strong defense. I knew it was an old sporting trick, however, he was right. I needed to anticipate her moves and find ways to overcome them. On Sunday, I gave Mary one last chance to save our marriage. My Sunday sermon was about forgiveness, love, and mercy in family relationships. It was heartening to see how the congregation responded. Many of the wives had teary eyes. After brunch, I headed back to the store. I was waiting for a friend. It was almost 6 o'clock in the evening when Big John walked through the front door. Noticing him, I took 2 long iced teas and headed outside. Okay, John, what's the matter? I asked as I sat down. Was the information I was given correct? John was a powerful man. He was tall and wide. He worked part-time as a collector, seemingly for someone on the side. Most of the time, he managed a construction crew and did quite well. I knew him because one day, he stopped to thank me personally for something I did. Unfortunately, since I had no idea what I had done, I had to ask him what it was. Then I learned that a former employee of my store named Sharon was a distant relative of his niece. As a result, the extended family felt like they owed me a lot. When I first saw Sharon one cold autumn evening, she seemed out of place standing on the corner and pacing back and forth. She marked her territory just like any street worker. She was a natural blonde, 5 feet 7 inches tall, with a lightly toned body that exuded with every step. It was clear from her clothes that she had class. If you knew the street, you knew she didn't belong there. Something else was happening. people on the street soon learned that she was not to be involved, encouraged, or touched. If someone did this, that person would have to answer to me. I watched her, waiting as I expected. It didn't take long. Finally, about 3 weeks later, on a very cold evening, she walked into the store and asked how much a small coffee cost. She started counting the coins to see if she had enough. I told her to put her wallet away and poured us both a large cup. She was surprised when I warmed up the cups first. I then took her and my cup and sat down at one of the inside tables. She joined me and wrapped her hands around the cup to keep them warm. We just sat there. I gave her time. I looked into the saddest blue eyes full of despair that I had ever seen. Finally, I said, "I need to know why." Her answer almost broke my heart. "My husband left our marriage right after the birth of our first child. I think he just couldn't see himself as a father. I'm in my last year at the local university, and it's too late to take out student loans. Social services have refused to help. I'm almost 3 months behind on rent. Thanks to the food bank, I can eat, but I had to sell some furniture to pay utilities. I don't want to quit school. I can't find a job, so I decided to sell myself on the street. It's been 3 weeks. I'm a complete failure, even at this," she said. I smiled and said, "Today it ends. Tomorrow is a new day. While you are at university, I will make your friends move you into an apartment. After studying, bring your child here with you. You can start working here and look after him at the same time. It's only minimum wage, but it will be 40 hours a week, and the hours you work will allow you to continue your studies," I said. "Why?" Sharon asked. I replied, "I once found myself in a situation similar to yours. Thanks to the kindness of a stranger, I was helped." Later, while working in a store, she learned that many were interested in her. Out of respect for me, no one touched her. When she asked why, she was told that each of them had received help from me at one time or another. Most of them considered me their friend. David spread the word that you should not be touched. They said you don't belong on the street. Something else is going on in your life, and until we know what, we can't help. During the university graduation, Sharon asked me to be her date. I happily went, against my wife's wishes. Sharon was asked to say a few words and proudly told everyone her story, which ended with her going to work for a government agency that refused to help her. "David, this is really bad. Thanks to the passwords and codes you provided, we were able to trace everything. Your house, church, and this store are infected. They have been turned not only into data sources but also into listening devices. We traced it to Tony Landers, a technology specialist who works for the government. In prison," John said. "As for your cell phone, all it takes is one text message and it's infected. Get yourself a new phone, and don't move anything old or it will be infected too." According to inside sources, Tony was bragging about his new girlfriend getting a divorce. "Looks like she will be on a horse now. I have a name. I just needed to connect the dots." Tony Landers was a tall 6-foot single, strong, and massive. He was nicknamed the Funeral Man after the wrestler of the same name. He had a street reputation for being unpleasant. "John, come by tomorrow. I'll have a new cell phone by then. I'll need to give Sharon's non-public number. Right now, I feel like she's one of the few people I can trust," I said sincerely. "I can do that. I talk to her regularly because she asked me to keep my eyes open. You know, she hasn't dated anyone since she met you. She's been asked out many times since she started working in social services, but she always refuses." I asked her why. She said there is someone she loves who has problems that will come out sooner or later. When that happens, she wants to be there for them, JN said. So I report to her and wait. I'm curious who it might be. Besides, she enjoys her job. Sharon told me to let you know off the record that they're opening an investigation into your relationship with your children. I looked at John in bewilderment. Why is she risking her career for me? She's just giving you what you gave her, my friend, John laughed. Unconditional love. Just so you know, her divorce is finalized. She didn't take her maiden name back, but she took the name of someone she respected and loved. Later that evening, when my eldest son walked into the store, Adam drove up with a neighbor who was driving from our area. I asked him if he would stay after closing and come home with me. He said yes. I was glad because I saw that he had something on his mind. "Dad," Adam asked, "what is a facade?" "Why?" I asked. "I heard Mom on the phone saying she needed to keep up the facade for a few more weeks, and then it would be over," he said. "I think I know what it is, but I'm not sure. Mom pretends to love you, but she really doesn't. For a long time, it took me a long time to figure it out. She's seriously dating a man I don't know. I found out his name Tony." "Physically or emotionally?" I asked. "You know it's wrong anyway because we're married," my son replied. "You're probably old enough to know your mother is about 8 weeks pregnant." I found out by calling the local abortion clinic to confirm her appointment for next Friday. When I was told this by a family friend, I had to check for myself to see if it was true. This, for the record, I wasn't supposed to know. The baby is not mine. My lawyer is already making arrangements to ensure she gets a DNA sample. When she does, I needed to prove to the court and church elders that this is not my baby. The church can fire me if it's my child. For allowing my wife's life to end, I've been informed that your mother is going to file for divorce. It's going to be tough and dirty. You're old enough to decide for yourself who you want to live with. The court will force James to stay with his mom. She will try to use social services to get them to find me an unfit father. I wouldn't be surprised at anything she tries. Adam, be prepared. She may try to argue in court that you and your brother are not my sons. So, on Monday during our doctor's appointment, they will take blood samples from us for a DNA test. I need to scientifically prove to the court that you are my children, I said. You knew? You knew? I can't believe you knew, he said with a big smile. Adam, people with mental illness have what we call fragmented consciousness. They lose memories and understanding, which causes them to reframe memories in a way that makes sense to them. For those with knowledge, they know that this does not have a basis in truth, but for everyone else, it's logical. Most end up destroying everything around them. I'm surprised we lasted this long, I said. The other side is that if I filed for divorce, those who know us would say that I was running away from my responsibilities as a husband, a man, and a Christian. So, I expected it, but I didn't know when. Well, the visit to our family doctor went well, considering I got him to attend. It took him a while to calm down. I explained that I knew he couldn't tell me anything about my wife's medical condition. He was surprised to learn that they also received a summons so that I could prove that the fetus was not mine. And the doctor realized that I was serious. She's going to sue me for divorce, I said. I need to make sure my sons are really mine in case she claims I'm not their father. I just wish you could confirm my guess that she's having another breakdown. When John arrived around 7 p.m., I told the staff I was going out. We left our store and headed to the corner where the Army and Navy bar was located. He was a member and could take me there. We both ordered 2 large beers. As soon as our order arrived, I handed him a piece of paper. It had my new phone number on it, the address and telephone number of my lawyer, and the last one was the address and name of my doctor's office. J.N. looked at the list and smiled. Tell Sharon not to contact me until she speaks with Stephen Pard, my lawyer, I said. When she sees him, she'll understand why he handled her divorce, change of name, and didn't charge her a penny for it, John said. When he realized, damn, you paid for it, didn't you? I laughed. Just promise me that she will never find out. The problem is that now I need to work something out because I can't do it legally. I expect Maria to file a divorce suit against me at any moment. I need her medical records to be in the hands of my lawyer in a way that can't be traced. My second wish is to find a way to destroy Tony Landers so that he realizes that his involvement with my soon-to-be ex-wife led to this. Sharon, I said, you're a person who draws the line, and when you do that, you don't back down. Once you've taken a position, there's no backing down. People on the street seem to agree, John said. Do you know who James and Sharia Duncan are? They're the couple you helped. If you remember, honestly, no. When I first met them, they weren't married. James looked more like a homeless person picking up cigarette butts on the street. Sharia worked part-time at a turbo gas station. I saw a diamond in the rough in James. When I gave him a job and some self-respect, once he got himself in order, I introduced them to each other. They did the rest, kept their jobs, went back to school, got married, and the rest was history, I said. Now that she has her children back, they have bought their first home and become regular Sunday churchgoers. Sharia is the granddaughter of Sean McKay. He is currently serving the remainder of a 15-year sentence for money laundering. He knows that thanks to your masterful intervention, the family was able to retain his great-grandchildren. I will let my contact know how you can be shown appropriate respect, he said, seriously. Most of the people on the streets moved here because they have relatives in prison, and each of them, thanks to your approach to them, believes that you are walking on water, John said. My maternal grandfather was the only one who knew I was going to run and why. He taught me to be kind to those around me on the way up because they're the ones I'll need on the way down, I replied. As a result, I respect everyone until they themselves show me that they don't deserve it. Your grandfather sounds like a wise man, John said. He had to be, I said. He raised 16 children and was a poor farmer all his life. I do not know how. I didn't care because for the first time in my life, I was drunk. John and I had to be kicked out at closing time. Somehow, I made it back to the store. I must have because I woke up face down on the carpeted floor, barely making it to the bathroom before throwing up. Uncle John, Sharon said sternly, you should be ashamed. You know my David doesn't drink that much. You shouldn't have let him get drunk, Sharon. Always call your cousin uncle out of respect and love for his wife in him. Johnny could be a real irritant at best. If he did anything to embarrass David, she would tear him apart. Now don't be mad, honey. You know this could have been the best thing that happened to him, he chuckled. This poor man has carried the weight of the world on his shoulders for so long. After learning last night that his wife had had 4 breakdowns in the last 10 years, we were both celebrating his impending freedom. He would have stayed if she hadn't thrown away their marriage. Now it's his obligation to her that's over. So tell me, did you know that you own his heart? I knew this after months of working for him. The verbal attacks he received from Maria just for hiring me were extreme. Maria hated everyone he was friends with or anyone he tried to help. Any time that he spent doing things for others was the time she thought was hers. I wanted to kill her so many times. I still can't understand how David stayed so calm. The only time I saw him defend himself was when she angrily demanded that I be fired. He fell silent. I could see the anger in his eyes. Then he said loudly so that everyone could hear, if anyone leaves Maria, it will be you. And if you leave, it will be forever, Sharon replied. I offered to quit, David said. No, I gave my word and I will keep it. I tried to explain that it didn't matter, but he ended the conversation by saying that it did matter to him. I realized this last night when it accidentally came out that he paid for your divorce. You know, he paid your ex-husband $155,000 just to sign the papers, John said as Sharon burst into tears. Damn, I thought you knew. Now don't forget to talk to Stephen. David thinks everything will come to a head over the next few weeks and is getting ready by putting everything in place. Let me know when it's done and I'll let you know David's new #1 question though. Where are you going to tell this man that he owns your heart? Deborah Preston, a middle-aged African-American woman, was a field officer who handled paperwork in the office. As she walked past Sharon's cube, she heard quiet sobs. Sharon, if you need to talk, come to my office, Deborah said. Deborah closed her office door after Sharon came in and asked what it was all about. By the time Sharon explained everything, she had calmed down, but Deborah burst into tears. Unbeknownst to Sharon, Deborah had been assigned by her boss to investigate allegations against Pastor David McGregor. Deborah forced Sharon to reveal her former married name so she could check the facts. If they could, it might explain a lot about the accusations made by Maria. Deborah was surprised that neither Sharon nor David admitted their true feelings. Could it be proven that Maria had mental health problems? If this were the case, it would make her claims less convincing. Why was this incident so important to her boss? Maria was panicking because her soon-to-be ex-husband didn't come home last night. This was not his custom. When she opened the door, she found his cell phone lying on the counter. This explained why her calls were not answered, but not his actions. He always kept her informed of what was happening. So far, he has behaved normally. She was glad because he still didn't seem to have any idea. Now something seems to have gone wrong. Has he stopped playing by her rules? She called the church 3 or 4 times, only to be told the service was unavailable. It was unusual. She needed to remain in control as she fought the feeling of him slipping away. She called Tony to see if he had learned anything. He didn't find out. She sent a message to her new friends to keep an eye on David's car. When they were outside, she spent the day waiting for someone to contact her. The church was in panic mode. David called an emergency meeting of all the deacons and any elders who might attend. He informed them about the upcoming divorce. He detailed how communications had been compromised, stressing that as a result, if anything of a personal nature became known, the church could be held accountable. When staff were informed, the financial planner admitted to internal theft of church funds. The police were called, as was the security team of our communications provider. Thus, the investigation began. David had a private conversation with the chief deacon to discuss the possibility of taking time off to find a new place to live for himself and hopefully his sons. The deacon suggested that he put off looking for housing until he talked to his wife. He then suggested that David take his sons fishing for a week while he worked on finding a suitable spot. "We'll let your assistant take your place until you return. That way, we'll have time to clean up the mess in the church." Maria arrived home a little later than usual and found the house quiet. As soon as she opened the side door, she realized that the children were missing. After searching around the house, she noticed a note taped to the refrigerator. It was a message from David. He explained that he spent most of the night with the police because of problems at the church. While this investigation continues, he planned to take his sons fishing on the lake for at least a week. David said he would return when the elders told him the police were finished. Maria was pleased because David remained David, even when he most likely felt guilty for not paying enough attention to the children. He compensated for it by arranging something like this. No doubt the kids will be doing a lot of unexpected things and talking about it for weeks. This reinforced her belief that David still had no idea now that they were out of reach. Maria called her lover Tony an hour later. Tony Landers was spotted by Chief Deacon Paul as he entered David and Maria's home with a couple of suitcases Thursday morning. Stephen Part arrived at his office early. It was supposed to be a very busy day. After he turned on the light, he headed to the break room to make his first cup of coffee for the day. That's when he noticed a large manila envelope with his name on it lying on a small table. Breaking the seal, he pulled out the contents. He read a printed message that said it was from Pastor David's friends. Below it were 4 files. It turned out that these were copies of medical records of David's entire family. Steve was delighted. It was a gold mine. Using his mobile phone, he took a photo of the envelope, the message, and the 4 files in case he had to prove how he received them. While he waited for the coffee to be ready, he left them on his secretary's desk with a note, "Copy in file. Send a copy to social services as soon as possible." The timing couldn't have been better because Sharon McGregor was his first client of the day. The files were on their way when Sharon arrived on time. Stephen's secretary told her to come in right away. Stephen explained to her that David expected his divorce to begin soon. As a result, David was afraid that Maria would claim they were having an affair, so he needed an affidavit describing everything about their relationship from the very beginning. It took his assistant 3 hours to arrange all this. The result was a 5-page document. "Sharon, this is a power of attorney from David giving you the authority to act on his behalf if the need arises," Stephen explained. He believes that Maria is experiencing another mental breakdown. "He told me to warn you that she will become more unstable and dangerous the further she falls. Given her condition, she can do anything and most likely will. So be careful. Here is a letter for you to read from him before we can continue." Sharon tore open the envelope and read the first handwritten letter. "Sharon, Stephen has been instructed to give you a check from my trust account that I opened with him about 8 months ago. I refinanced my 4 apartment buildings, freeing up as much equity as possible knowing that in the event of a divorce, my wife would be entitled to at least half. Since Maria would likely force the court to require Stephen to reveal what he had in my account, I needed to get those funds out of her hands. I want you to open a joint account in our names and deposit all funds into it once they arrive. Invest most of them in short-term guaranteed banknotes. This way, if anything happens to me, you and our son will be provided for." Attached were photocopies of all his important information. Stephen then handed her a check for $1.1 million. Sharon started crying. "Does he believe in me that much?" Sharon sobbed. Stephen laughed with a wide smile. "He doesn't even know you can open an account like David and Sharon McGregor. What are you going to tell him?" Still overcome with emotion, Sharon said, "Stephen, you know I love him so much it hurts. I wish I could do more with the church, his wife, and kids. I knew there was no hope, so I kept my feelings to myself. I don't know how he does it, but I believe he knows how you feel. This man is always one step ahead of the game. This morning, as if by magic, I found the medical records of his soon-to-be ex-wife, his children, and him in the break room. I sent copies to your boss," Stephen said. With that, Stephen gave Sharon a copy of her son's new birth certificate with her ex-husband's name removed and her son's name changed according to the court order he had received. "Wow, you did it. I'm so glad because you thought it wouldn't work," Sharon said with a smile. "I made your ex sign an affidavit in which he stated that he forged your signature on the original. I obtained the RIT and filed it without your knowledge. The rest was easy since your son is so young. He will never know," Stephen said. "How can I ever repay you?" Sharon asked sincerely. "Marry David as soon as possible and name your next child after me. We both know you were meant for each other. Besides, this is a story I will tell for the rest of my life," Stephen replied. Cora Porter was named regional supervisor just over 2 years ago when her boss retired. Cora was close to 60 and very religious. She was known for being strict but fair. Cora demanded that her staff scrutinize each case in search of the truth. Deborah Preston wasn't surprised to be called into Cora's office. On the way there, she wondered what case her boss was looking for an update on. Deborah assumed it must be David's case because she remembered what Cora said when she assigned the case to her. "He is a pastor, a community leader, and our investigation will likely become public knowledge. If the accusations are true, he will be completely destroyed. Keep it a secret. Find out if Sharon and David are related. Make it your priority." Deborah was right and spent the next half hour explaining what she had learned so far. "God bless," exclaimed Cora with relief. "I was afraid that our church would lose the best pastor we've ever had." "So you think Sharon and David love each other, but neither of them knows the other's feelings? David doesn't know that Sharon took his last name? The reason I ask is because we received copies of all the McGregor family's medical records by courier from Stephen Pardon's office." "Wow, what are they showing?" Deborah asked. "They detail Maria's long-term mental health problems and that the doctor has diagnosed another breakdown. They show that he arranged for her to have an abortion the following week. David's file shows that he is trying to prove that the child is not his and even went so far as to order a DNA paternity test on his children. More importantly, there is no mention in any of the files that supports Maria's claims of abuse. Do you have anything to share? Did you know that Sharon's husband left her in the 8th year of their marriage immediately after the birth of their son? She was in her final year at the local university. She asked us for help, we refused. I got her former married name and checked the case. We thought at the time that her husband would take responsibility. We were wrong, he ran away and moved to another state. She was so desperate that she tried to sell herself on the street," Deborah said regretfully. "You were the one who took her case? It's a shame we didn't recheck." Cora turned pale, and her body trembled. David spread the word on the street that Sharon should not be touched since it came from him. They listened. When she finally met him, David forced her to talk about her situation. It was David who provided her with free housing, a job where Sharon was able to look after her child while working. All of this was confirmed by my clients. None of them had anything bad to say about David or Sharon, but Maria, that's a different story. "Tell me more," Cora said, showing more interest than usual. For example, one evening a couple walked into a bookstore while David was working there to ask him if he could lend them a few dollars for food before they got their student loans the following week. David asked them how much food they had left at home, and they said not much. Instead of giving them money, he went back to the storage room and came back with the biggest chicken they had ever seen. Apparently, a local farmer had brought freshly cleaned birds that very morning. He gave them this chicken, then pulled $40 out of his wallet. He told them that should be enough until their check arrived, Deborah explained. When Maria found out about this, she humiliated and insulted him in public for a month because he gave away something they could have used. My husband always said that David walked tall and carried a small stick, Kay replied. My husband is the head deacon at our community church. When David left with his sons on Monday, he told me that Mary's lover moved in with her that week. He has digital evidence that he has been there since then. Maria's complaint is part of the package she submitted to the court. She brought it with her when she filed her plea. It even has her lawyer's name on it, Deborah said. I didn't tell Sharon that Maria was claiming David was the father of her son. This seems to explain why Sharon requested time to meet with a lawyer in the morning. David must have been preparing and needing to challenge possible false statements. David's main strength is his ability to analyze all possible outcomes of a situation from all angles and prepare for any consequences. That's what makes him so calm. When you finish your report, send a copy of your findings to Stephen Pard, since he helped us. Let's do the same for him. Be sure to include in the report my mistake for not retesting Sharon, Kay said. Well, it won't be complete until I talk to it, but there is no doubt now that Maria was trying to use us to destroy it. So now we know why Sharon turned down all the dates. Most men called her a cold fish. Her heart wasn't in it, Cora said happily. Because it already belonged to someone else. It was midday when Sharon returned to her desk and immediately got to work. Her thoughts were full of what-ifs and other daydreams, making it difficult for her to focus on routine. Although she tried not to worry, she was concerned about David and the problems he had to face. Sharon was surprised when Cora interrupted her and asked her to follow her to her office. First of all, young lady, I now know about your attitude towards my pastor and his soon-to-be ex-wife, Cora said firmly. My husband Paul told me that David took his sons fishing for a week so he could explain it to them and help them adjust. He will be back in town on Monday. I want to apologize for the way I handled your case 2 years ago. I should have double-checked and didn't. It was a rookie mistake, but I wasn't a rookie. As for David, he was cleared of all charges thanks to Stephen Pard, but his case will legally remain open for 6 months. Sharon breathed a sigh of relief. Thanks for letting me know. As of the 1st of next month, you will be promoted to a regular field worker position. This is a full-time position, so I have changed your timesheet for today to reflect working in the field, Cora said. My husband is the head deacon of our church. David calls him boss. Since David and the boys left, Mary's lover has moved in with her. Deborah will send all the information to Stephen Pard. We know that she accuses him of adultery with you, violence, child abuse, as well as physical and mental abuse. She also claims that your son is his child. Damn, David did it again. I don't know how he does it, he's always one step ahead. He sent me a message through a mutual friend that I needed to meet Stephen Pard. That's why I had to leave this morning, she said. How is he otherwise? When was the last time you actually talked to him, if I may ask? Cora said. On the night of my graduation from university. He proudly accompanied me against his wife's wishes, Sharon said. He didn't even kiss me in congratulations. David's friend took him out on Monday night and got him drunk, Paul said. It was the best medicine David could get. David said he woke up and found all the stress and pressure gone. When he left that day, he was relaxed. Thank God, with everything he's been through, he was ready for a heart attack. When he gets back, he'll be living in the house that was my parents'. It's on our property, so I organized a cleanup crew to keep him ready, Cora said, noticing the relief on Sharon's face. He agreed to rent a furnished house for a year. Do you know why I changed my last name to McGregor? Sharon asked. To honor the person you loved but thought you'd never have, Kay replied. Let's go to lunch, I have someone you need to meet. It's my husband, Paul, and we have some plans to discuss. It was Monday morning, and my 2 sons and I parked in front of a warehouse store to pick up the preformed packing boxes that I needed to pack my belongings into. While the boys were finishing up their McDonald's breakfast, I went in and paid for the items I ordered. It was 9 in the morning when we arrived at our entrance. As soon as we walked in, the first thing I did was type out a letter for my soon-to-be ex-wife and printed it out. Using clothing boxes, we quickly packed and loaded all my items. Then, all the other things followed. My tools, personal books, and everything church-related were the last to be loaded. The computer desk, chair, and related accessories were also packed. I took off my house keys and put them in an envelope along with my letter, leaving it on the kitchen table. After kissing my sons goodbye, I took off my wedding ring and gave it to my eldest son, saying, "Now you are the man of the house. This ring now belongs to you." An hour later, I started unloading my things at the new location. The 2,400 square feet, 2-level, 3-bedroom home was perfect. There was even a small room, 8 by 10 feet, that would be perfect for my home office. One call was enough to connect the electricity. I had just finished unloading when Paul walked up. "David, Cora is almost ready for dinner, so why don't you join us? It will give us a chance to discuss church business. Plus, you look like you're ready for a break," Paul suggested. So, we went to the main house after I washed myself. By the time we reached the patio, Cora was standing there, holding cold beers for us. Oh, how delicious it was. For some reason, Cora was in an extremely good mood. I wondered why. After Cora went back inside to start dinner, Paul informed me that our financial planner had been accused of theft. Our total damages were over $75,000. 2 members of our staff have been suspended pending a final decision from the prosecutor's office. The hack of our communications was connected to Tony Lander's apartment and the local state prison. Charges will be filed soon. I pretended that I didn't have the slightest idea. Maria pulled into her driveway and noticed that her husband's car was not in the garage. When the garage door came down, the children opened the side door to let her inside. They were excited, both trying to tell her what they did, what they ate, and what exciting things they did together. She asked if they knew where their father was. The children suddenly fell silent. Adam pointed to the envelope lying on the kitchen table. "Daddy's not stupid, Mom," he said. "He told us and prepared us for this last week. We helped him move out." Adam and James watched as their mother's face paled after she took out his letter. The house keys fell on the table. The letter said, "I know about your abortion. I know that your lover shared our bed last week. I know about children's services. I am leaving you the keys to the house. I took what I wanted. Tomorrow, I will change the locks at the store. You can pick up your resignation papers and your last check. You are now free so Tony Landers can move in with you again." Maria began to cry because this was not how it was supposed to be. She wanted him to be broken, destroyed, living with the people on the street he always helped. She was losing her chance for revenge. Since he ruined her life, he had to pay. She swore she would find another way. Paul and I were in the middle of our second beer when we both heard the front door ring. I saw a huge smile on Paul's face, so I knew something was up and I just got ready. Cora has become very close to one of her coworkers because of everything that's been going on at work, at church, and with you. I think she's gone overboard. Her coworker once needed social services help, and Cora stepped in. She became, for her, the daughter she always wanted, Cora said. My youngest son wanted to ask this lady out when he met her, but Cora quickly put a stop to that. After talking to me, Cora convinced me that I needed to make amends. "Sorry, David. We're both very excited tonight." "We're setting you up," Paul said. "I think you'll be more than pleased with the result." Paul was not given to intrigue, so I was full of bewilderment, trying to guess we both knew who they wanted to introduce to me. There was Sharon, but no one knew about my feelings for her. She was just one of many I helped. I heard footsteps approaching and stood up and turned to see her friend. I was completely shocked. Sharon looked stunning. "David, I believe you've already met my colleague." "In fact, I know you're an old friend," Cora said happily. "This is Miss Sharon McGregor." "Sharon, this is David." Before I could even open my mouth, Sharon threw herself into my arms. I don't know which of us started crying first. To this day, we do not forget our first kiss, when tears of joy flowed down our faces. We were both wrecks of emotion, but we didn't care. I couldn't believe she took my last name. Cora, let's go inside the house and give them some privacy, Paul said before heading into the house. Cora and Paul watched us hug each other, realizing how difficult it was for us to accept that we were together after such a long time. It reminded them of the times when Paul returned home from the army and how warm those meetings were. Paul wondered if David was his reward for all those painful years. This gave Cora and him a deeper appreciation of how these two young lovers felt. They were both very happy with how things turned out, Cora continued. Were we like this when I came back from halfway around the world? Asked Paul. Remember, dear, we could communicate with each other by letters almost every day. We could express our love to each other. David, being a pastor, a married man with children, could not openly admit anything. If Mary had not started, David was still being there for her, trying to do what he thought was right. It was her behavior that allowed this to happen tonight. It's probably the best thing she's ever done, Cora explained. Releasing their pent-up emotions overwhelms them. For them, finding a way to express themselves for the first time must be like the walls of Jericho falling. Knowing what we know, I'm very proud of both of them. They've set the bar high for us all. Let's pour some champagne to celebrate while we tell you how their meeting took place. Sharon and I finally broke up when Cora and Paul walked out, but we continued to hold hands. We couldn't help but notice the light on their faces. Meeting her was so welcome, but it made a lot of things difficult for me with the church. I knew I had to consider resigning as a pastor. I was still a married man in the eyes of the law. We had a very shortened service on Sunday. It still went on for an hour due to the fact that we had to explain to the parish what was going on. We uncovered the theft, the compromise of our communications, and the ongoing investigations. What took the longest time was what was going on outside the church with Sharon and me. The deacons had met earlier and decided on a course of action, but we felt we needed to get the approval of our ward, Paul said. I stood before them and informed them of the false accusations made against you. I made it clear that social services had investigated and found them to be untrue. Cora intervened. I disclosed the fact that Maria had an abortion. Medical records prove that the child was not yours, Paul continued. Maria left the church with her behavior. Paul explained how he had a video of Maria's boyfriend moving in while you were away. Sister Ruth stood up and spoke. Ruth explained that you had lived in a loveless marriage since your wife had her first nervous breakdown. She spoke of the verbal abuse you and your sons had to endure. Ruth said that the Mary she knew no longer exists. It was a shock to many. I was very proud when she admitted that she was the one who told you what was going on. Ruth's final point was that she believed that Maria was in a state of mental breakdown, that she had reached the point where she could harm others, including herself. Then I explained that the deacons agreed to recognize David as already divorced, if the others agreed. Each adult stood up to show their approval. That's when I said that Maria was trying to smear your good name and explained how I met Sharon through our work. I admitted my mistake. I told them how you intervened to change everything. I had to reveal everything to prove that the accusations of adultery against you are unfair. I hope you're not angry, David. I know you are a very private person. I did this because I wanted to explain that I felt that you both were in love but never acted on it, said Cora. I explained that you would be living in what used to be my parents' home. Since we had all agreed to recognize you as divorced, I reminded everyone that in the time of Jesus, for a man to be considered married, all he had to do was bring her into his tent. Isn't that what Joseph did to Mary? I said. To get a divorce, he had to simply say, I divorce you, and that was done. So the deacons suggested that when Sharon had a wedding ring on her finger, they would consider you to be acting biblically as husband and wife. I can say with pleasure that the parish completely agrees, Paul said happily. That's why we arranged this, Cora said happily. The rest is up to you too. We did everything we could. Let's go eat. Paul asked me if I wanted to lead a prayer of thanksgiving, but I declined because I was too emotional. Having Sharon openly next to me still captivated me. I couldn't stop looking into her eyes. We both had huge smiles. Dinner was off the charts. Cora really tried: steak, baked potato, corn on the cob, and salad. As Cora cleared the table before dessert was served, they noticed that I had gone silent. Cora, concerned, asked, David, did we do something wrong? No, I asked the same questions myself. 3 people looked at me like I was crazy. I was so absorbed in meeting Sharon that I forgot to ask where and how the baby was. Sharon laughed. David John McGregor is staying with Uncle John and Aunt Margaret tonight because I didn't know how late I'd be back. He's an active 2-year-old boy who keeps me quite busy, she said with a wink and a smile. I must warn you that Uncle John expects you to learn some serious Irish songs because he likes to sing when he's drunk. Paul and I went into the office while the ladies cleaned up the kitchen. I thanked them for what they did. I had to admit I was still in shock. Paul noted that Sharon proved that she will wait forever. This kind of love is rare and hard to find. If I were you, I would take her to the jewelry store tonight and buy that diamond because neither of you will be able to sleep. Become Joseph and then take your Mary into your tent. That's what I did. After saying goodbye, I asked her to take me to the mall as I needed to buy a few things. She simply handed me the keys to her car. We went to Gerard's, where she picked out a set of 3 rings. After purchasing, I took out a large diamond and knelt down. Sharon blushed and said yes. We went to her apartment so she could grab some clothes and then return to our new house. Sharon took a photo of the ring and sent it to Cora and Aunt Marge. She continued texting the 2 of them until we returned. Cora told her that she would be doing field training as scheduled, so don't worry about coming. I know you will want to move here as soon as possible. Have David come and so Deborah can honestly say she talked to him. I wish I could say we spent the night making crazy, rough, passionate love. I can't. We were still floating in the air. I told her I was sorry I didn't invite her to a romantic dinner, but Sharon just laughed. This romantic dream has come true. I think I fell in love with you over my first cup of coffee when you gave me hope and a chance to dream. How many of you can say that a whole parish gathered them, my dear? We ended up falling asleep on the bed still fully clothed. Our bodies merged together. We both woke up many times because our minds needed convincing that this was real. Everyone couldn't help but notice how optimistic Cora was that Tuesday morning when she arrived more than a few minutes late. Her face seemed to glow. Some wondered if she had gotten lucky last night. Cor liked it when her plans turned out better than expected. With her married son so far away, visits from her grandchildren frightened her and she looked forward to having the baby near her again. Sharon and I met John and Marge at Denny's for breakfast. It was nice to see little Johnny. He took to me like a duck to water. Once Sharon decided what she wanted to keep, we got to work. The items we were going to put into storage were loaded first using wardrobe boxes. This part of the job didn't take long. Then we loaded up the children's furniture and went back to unload while the girls cleaned the apartment. On the way back, we left things in the warehouse and went back to load up what was going to Goodwill. By 1 p.m., it seemed like we had everything done and Sharon got to work. It was about 4 o'clock when I walked up to the Social Security desk to see if she was home. She was, so I waited for her to come out to pick me up. When she greeted me, she was shocked to see me with a 2-year-old and a diaper bag in my arms. As we walked back to her office, Deborah spoke up. I thought your children were older, she said. So I was wondering, who is this little boy with you? I laughed and replied, this little guy came back into my life thanks to some very close friends. My office is right here, she said. Come in. No, you can't do it without me, Sharon said, appearing next to me and placing her hand in mine. Everything that happens to David must now include me. Deborah's lips dropped in surprise. Sharon giggled, her face beaming with pride. Then she raised her left hand and said, he promised to make an honest woman out of me as soon as he was free. Deborah shouted out her congratulations. Sharon then introduced her son. Very quickly, the room filled with people wondering what was happening. Cora slipped inside and took Johnny from me, ordering everyone to leave. While Deborah was making notes in my file, I heard someone say, now I know why I never made it to first base. The 4 of us spent the last hour talking before heading home. Sharon and I stopped at the grocery store just to buy some basics. Every married man knows perfectly well that you should not argue with a woman about the price or brand of household goods. Every person stupid enough to open their mouth has already lost the battle. We took 2 carts. I pushed Johnny following his mother. I entertained him while Sharon filled them. I didn't notice when Maria and Sharon met. I just heard swearing and looked up to see Sharon walking towards her. Their eyes were blazing, their nostrils seemed as if they could release flames. "Maria, I've been waiting for this day," Sharon said, standing face to face with her. "I knew you two were involved," Maria said, raising her hand and hitting Sharon hard. It left a red mark. Maria started calling her every dirty word in the book. Sharon's first blow hit Maria in the stomach. Maria responded just as strongly. A catfight began. I retreated, not wanting to come between these two determined ladies. Their anger pushed them both on. This got a lot of attention. "Maria, you blame him for your pathetic life." "I thank him for saving mine," Sharon said. "You threw away what you had just to get revenge," Sharon said. "So I have to thank you for driving him away to me. I claim him as mine. Follow him and you will follow me. I can be as dirty as you because I learned to be like that by watching for you." They rushed at each other, hands and bodies collided in such a way as to maximize pain. It was Sharon who knocked Maria to the floor before landing right on top of her. The way Maria landed, her hip would hurt for quite some time. Both continued to throw punches as they fell. Store employees finally came to separate them. As they brought Maria out, she shouted, "We're not done yet. I'll make you pay." Sharon responded by shouting, "Come on." Sharon, in front of everyone, gave me a deep kiss and then screamed, "Maria, remember, I fight for my man." Maria began to cry. This didn't go according to plan. It was 10 o'clock in the morning and I was sitting in my store, having appointed a new store manager and 2 new assistants, when I was handed the documents containing a court order to freeze all of our bank accounts. I was prohibited from being within 150 meters of her or my children. This confirmed my thoughts. I beat her at her own game. I called Steve Pardon's office and asked for a copy of the store's incorporation documents to prove ownership. Because things were coming to a head, I asked my staff to send him a copy of the divorce papers. A few minutes later, my soon-to-be ex-wife's younger brother pulled up on his motorcycle. "Listen, if you hit my sister or touch your sons again, I will kill you," he said. "She told me everything. I know about your illicit affair and your new son." The fool believed her lies. I laughed. "Are you sure about this? Maybe you should ask Tony Lander who she's living with now. Better yet, have you talked to our sons?" His face turned red when I told him I had documented his threat and would report it. He was a jerk who never grew up. It was about 1 o'clock in the afternoon when Maria entered the store through the front door with 2 police officers. It was ironic because the lock had been changed. One officer was a woman, the other a man. She had a court order to take possession of the store because it was joint property. As soon as it was presented, they wanted me to leave the premises. At that point, I pulled out the articles of incorporation, showing that it was owned by a corporation and I was merely a representative. The male officer left the store and returned shortly after, stating that the court order had been revoked. I handed my soon-to-be ex-wife her dismissal papers. She lost control and screamed. This didn't go according to her plans. I raised the issue of setting a trap. The police asked why, and I showed them a copy of the restraining order. They escorted Maria out, trying to calm her down. I smiled, knowing it wouldn't look good for Maria in their report. I managed to get Johnny to sleep for the night. This house was slowly becoming a home. Sharon and I cooked our first dinner together while Johnny entertained himself in his high chair. The little 2-year-old had already become very attached to me. I walked into the bedroom to find Sharon in the shower. Little Johnny woke me up before the alarm went off, so I got up to pick him up. While putting on my pajama pants, I brought him to our bed. After getting him ready for work, Sharon looked so peaceful and content this morning. Johnny and I started messing around, and it was his laughter that woke her up. Sharon slowly opened her eyes. There was great satisfaction on her face. After Sharon left to drop Johnny off before going to work, I began to prepare an outline for Sunday's sermon. It was based entirely on Matthew 5 verse 7, "Blessed are the merciful, for they will obtain mercy." I wrote this to explain how God sees everything. Sometimes even the smallest action of one person can be an act of mercy for another. By the time I finished, I had used 8 scriptures and 2 illustrations in a 45-minute sermon. Considering the research time, it took me over 4 hours to prepare. From that moment, I began to memorize it. I emailed my assistant a copy. It was time to get back to my normal schedule. My assistant, who was also a youth pastor, took on more responsibility. We usually shared responsibilities in the office. He came in the morning, and I got to work in the afternoon. The office was open to members 3 days a week, but we were both on call 24 hours a day. After I took care of my personal grooming routine, I dressed in my suit. I called our secretary and informed her that I would now return to my normal schedule. She replied, "Okay, I'll see you after lunch." After dinner, I went into my home office. I took the typed copy of my sermon and began to refine it. With each iteration, changes were made. I needed to bring the sermon to a state where it seemed natural. Sharon stood at the entrance to the room, watching me as I worked. I was still wearing my suit. She smiled when she noticed that my hands were constantly in motion, except when I was emphasizing scripture. "I could look at you all day," Sharon said. "Every time you pause, I see how your mind works, improving and discovering a better way of expression. Every sermon outline I write as a specific theme with the main points outlined. The rest comes from working on it in my head." "Someone else can take it and make it their own," I replied. "Like Jesus, I try to simplify it so those who hear it can take it with them." "A great teacher leaves an impression to ponder in the minds of those who listen," Sharon added. On Friday evening, I was in the store doing bookkeeping when my youngest son, James, showed up. He was 10 years old and large for his age. As soon as I saw him, I knew he was upset. His clothes were dirty, and there were traces of tears on his face. I grabbed a couple of steaks and muffins and led him to the last table away from the front of the store. "What happened, James?" I asked. I heard Mom and Tony arguing loudly. "I got scared," James said. I could understand his feelings. As a child, I remember feeling the same way. I explained to him why he had never heard his mother and me fight like that. "James, for a lot of people, what your mom and Tony did is completely normal. Sometimes serious discussions get overheated because it's human nature that causes our emotions to get out of control," I said with natural concern. "Can I come and stay with you for a few days?" James asked. I stood up, explaining that I would be back soon. I went to the file, took out a restraining order, and gave it to James to read. "James, I'd love to say yes. Unfortunately, the restraining order your mother got makes that impossible. I'm putting myself in a situation where if I take you in, I could be arrested and put in jail," I explained. At that moment, one of the saleswomen came up and said, "This is your wife on the phone. She demands to be allowed to talk to you." I brought James into a small office and asked him to remain quiet before I put my phone on speaker. "Hello, Maria. What do you want?" I said. James saw Tony and me arguing. He disappeared. "I think he's heading towards you. If you see him, send him home. The court order is clear that you have no right to have contact with him. If you don't send him home, I'll call the police. If he's with you, you're dead," Maria said. James heard this and ran out, telling the clerk to tell my dad I wasn't here before leaving the store. By the time I hung up and walked out the door, he was gone. I called the police station and explained what happened. I sent them a photo from my wallet. Once received, the officer said the control room would send an alert. I called Sharon to tell her what happened. She knew I was worried. Stay in the store. In elementary school, children are regularly taught that if they are in danger, they need to call 911. James can do this. If he does, they will route his call to the children's emergency line. Only they can cancel a state court order, Sharon explained. James ran away to protect you. I knew Sharon was right. Being a worried father is not good. I kept leaving the store and coming back, trying to see if he was nearby. My employees supported me, saying that everything would be fine. About an hour later, I received a call from social services. James did what Sharon was thinking. I informed the representative about the restraining order and why. I also said that I was checked by the local office and was cleared. The problem is that the court order was still in effect. I have James on the other line now. Would you take him and take care of him if it were possible? She asked. Yes. I rented a 3-room furnished house. There is a place for James and his brother if he wants to come, I answered. The problem is that James overheard his mother saying that she would put me in jail if she caught me with him, I answered. Give me the fax number. I will send you a temporary guardianship order that will allow you to retain custody until the matter is fully resolved. I will also inform the local police station, she replied. I agreed with joy. Your son is on his way to your store, I called Sharon to let her know. Sharon must have been watching us because she was at the door before we got out of my car. James ran into her arms as if they were old friends. While she was working for me, she spoiled him to the fullest. Take Johnny. We need to get James some clean clothes, something to eat, and a shower, Sharon said. I've already made his bed. So, we went to Walmart and then Macy's. Like most, we ended up buying more than we needed. Sharon finally convinced James to try on the suit. He was reluctant, but she insisted, explaining that since it would be her first time attending church with me, we both needed to look our best. James, first impressions are often misleading. With everything that's going on with us right now, we need to present a united front for your father, Sharon explained. Will everything about us being together be questioned indirectly? James asked. Yes, they will watch how we interact with each other, together and with little Johnny. Although they have already approved of what we do in public, how they personally feel may be very different, Sharon expressed. James, she's right. Apply this to yourself for a second. Ask yourself if any of your friends have said one thing about you to your face and something else to another mutual friend behind your back, I added. That's the situation Sharon and I find ourselves in, to put it simply. I was pleasantly surprised by how James accepted his new reality. I was taken aback when he told Sharon directly on Sunday morning, as she examined him in his new suit, I don't think I like the term stepmom, and using your name seems too formal. Do you mind if I call you my second mom? James asked. Of course, yes, Sharon replied, if you agree to be our ring bearer when we get married. I was worried, but I didn't admit it. As the four of us entered the church, I realized there was no need to worry. Paul and Cora were waiting for us as soon as we arrived. Cora held little Johnny in her arms. Soon, she was telling everyone that she was his godmother. Sharon was introduced as my fiancée, many people commented on her ring, and everyone said how beautiful she was. I completely agreed with this. I heard James explaining to his friends that Sharon would soon become his second mother. Paul opened the service and then invited me onto the platform. Although Sharon had heard my sermon many times during practice, her attention to me seemed a little excessive. Sharon, James, and John sat with Paul and Cora. Uncle John and Aunt Marge sat on the other side of her. This was their first visit to our church. I focused on the biblical beatitudes found in the 5th chapter of Matthew. I brought forward the idea that applying Christian standards had brought relief and blessings to my life. Every man knows that it is his wife who maintains peace in their home. Too often we take them for granted, other times, instead of asking, we assume. Don't forget, dear ladies, these words can also apply to you, I said. This brought out a few smiles and laughs. I ended the sermon with a quote from Hebrews where the biblical writer implied, do not accept the sin of others, for it will be added to yours on the day of judgment. Look at me, in my situation. It was the sins of another person that led to what happened. None of us could stop it, but we have to deal with the consequences and move on. We forgive, but we do not forget, and we remain on guard because of this. After the service, I walked to the main entrance with Sharon at my side so introductions could be made. She received some advice on how to be a pastor's wife. 8 of us went for brunch. During brunch, Marge commented on how much she enjoyed the sermon. Sharon then talked about how she watched me work on it. I never realized how much preparation it takes. Even the sermon today was a little stronger and different, she said. Paul convinced James to work with him on the farm. We had no idea that he would fall in love with the land. James eventually became a farmer, like his namesake. We enjoyed peace and quiet for a couple of weeks. My first divorce hearing was soon to take place. One of my regular employees got sick. As a result, I was working in the store that Tuesday evening. I locked the store, vacuumed the floors, and cleaned the tables, getting it ready for the next day. As I walked out the back door into the darkness at midnight, I was attacked. I felt the knife pierce my side before I fell. The next thing I remember was being in the hospital. I was still coming out of this state, not knowing where I was, when I heard a voice calling me. What they said didn't make sense in my mind. I opened my eyes, not seeing anything because everything was blurry. I just knew that someone was holding my hand. I felt exhausted, tired, all I wanted was to go back to sleep. "Fight it," the voice continued to say. "You must stay awake." I forced my eyes open, trying to focus. Slowly, I followed the voice, guiding me towards a clearing in the fog. "He woke up," Sharon exclaimed with relief. "He will survive." God heard my prayers almost instantly. Doctors and nurses gathered around me, flashlights were shining into my eyes. The stethoscope felt cold on my chest. They took my blood pressure as well as my pulse. It seemed like there were a lot of tubes sticking out of me. "Welcome back, Pastor. We thought we had lost you for a while." "It's been a tough fight," said the doctor. "I didn't know Sharon, your wife, made us fight like never before. She was right when she said my David is too stubborn to die. She was here all night waiting for good news." "Can I see her?" I asked, still struggling to open my eyes. "I'm here, honey." "Cora and Paul are here too, they're in the surgery waiting room," Sharon said. "What's happened?" I asked. "You were stabbed 7 times after you left the store," Sharon said. "Uncle John went looking for you when you didn't come home. He was the one who called the ambulance. They didn't believe you would survive." "I did. They had to use 8 pints of blood overnight. Your insides were so torn apart," the doctor said. "He's stabilizing, all his vital signs are good. If he doesn't have any infections or flare-ups, he'll be discharged in about a week." I looked at Sharon, seeing the worry and stress on her face. She was tired and needed rest. Looking around the room, I noticed that it was 11 a.m. It must have been morning because light was streaming in through the window. Sharon leaned over and kissed my cheek just as her tears of relief began to flow. I would have liked to hug her, but I didn't have the strength. Luckily, the nurse call button was on my right hand. I pressed it, and the nurse's assistant came in. I asked her to find Cora and Paul and asked them to come over. She found them. Cora urged Sharon to calm down. "We discussed my ordeal and how I dealt with it," Sharon explained. "Both of our boys are with Marge and John." The nurse came in and asked them not to stay long because I needed to rest. "They caught the guy who attacked you," Paul said. "He's an adult with intellectual disabilities, the mind of an 8-year-old child. He admitted that he is a friend of Maria," Sharon said. "Cora, Paul, the last time I spoke to Stephen Pard, he warned me that David thought Maria was dangerous. That's why I was given power of attorney over David. The question is whether the police will be able to connect the attack with Maria or whether she will escape responsibility again. If no money was transferred, then this is just an assumption that will not stand up in court," I explained. "Sharon, let Uncle John know so he doesn't do something stupid." They said goodbye. Seeing that I was falling asleep, 10 days were living hell for Sharon before I was released. Cora and Paul were completely supportive. Paul and James developed a deep friendship. Everything they did together on the farm was enjoyable for both of them. Paul said his own sons had never bonded like that. Everything he does seems natural to him. When I explain something to him, he listens, thinks about it, and then asks, "What if we did this or that?" Frankly, your boy made me think about a lot of things together. We changed a few practices for the better. As soon as I got home that Friday morning, Sharon began to relax. Marge and John were to come for dinner on Saturday. It turned out that Sharon's biggest fear was that I would make her a widow before our wedding. I took my cell phone and called Stephen's office, leaving a message for him to call me. Johnny slept after lunch. James was in the fields with Paul. I was still weak, so I laid down on the master bed, watching a rerun of Law and Order when Sharon joined me. I took her in my arms. We just hugged, whispering "I love you" to each other. This was what we both needed. We restored our intimacy in the most ordinary way. James ran in shouting, "Mom, Dad, where are you?" Sharon replied, lying on our bed, watching TV. "Why?" James ran in excitedly. "Grandpa Paul wants to sponsor me in 4-H, if you guys don't mind." We both smiled and said that was great. He ran to tell his new grandfather that we approved. For H, we'll introduce him to kids his age who are interested in farming. Sharon smiled. So now I'm just a mom. Paul is now a grandfather. I wish it was as easy for adults. It will get better soon, I promise, I said. We'll have to start planning our wedding. John and I walked around the house. I slowly regained my strength. Marge and Sharon were inside, working together to prepare our evening reception. James helped Paul clean out the barn for the first time. If I was thinking correctly, the shower and the laundry room would be used for the first time due to rural living, John said quietly. Something will happen where the words set up and trap are used. Some collateral damage may occur as long as it doesn't affect my oldest. I'm okay with it, I said. I don't want or need to know the details in advance. Sharon is still on cloud 9. She's never been happier, John said. Maria said it was like she found the pot of gold at the end of the rainbow. Now, if only we could fix her relationship with her parents. She doesn't talk about them much. Perhaps if she did, she'd discover that it's not as big a deal as she thinks, I said. Until she's ready, I won't push her. Her father chose a groom with large assets for her many years ago. She told him that she would not become someone's broiler chicken for the sake of a roof over her head, John explained. After that, they just grew apart, leaving her mother confused. I smiled. John, throw a surprise engagement party and invite them. If you need funds to organize it, let me know. I'll be happy to help arrange it to happen after Sunday service. It will seem natural because we always get offers to go for Sunday brunch, John laughed. You're a trickster, but this is a great idea. This way, you can be introduced to the whole family. Everyone will see for themselves that Sharon has made the right decisions in her life. Most know you by reputation. Without a word, Sharon will be shown that her father was wrong. My assistant did a great job. I enjoyed sitting next to Sharon and Jan, listening to someone else. Marge and John are now regulars. Stephen Pard was there with his wife, which was rare. After the service, he told me that my divorce had been approved. I told him I wanted the divorce to be finalized quickly, offering them a house and apartments. I will leave the store children and will not pay child support. Also, make a new will where Sharon gets everything, Stephen said. I thought you were being too generous until I remembered you refinanced the apartments. You'll come out ahead, I replied. Yes, but in 6 months or a year, I will be the owner again because Maria won't pay for property management services. She will be in a situation where she faces eviction. She never saw the value in what I did, I said. She was never able to see the value in my actions. Thursday afternoon, I was in the church office after a long conversation with one of the parishioners about her relationship with her youngest son. It was mostly me listening while she let it all out. He started having serious problems with friendships with people she considered unsuitable. Nothing they said or did worked, I said. He declared his independence. He thinks he knows everything. Prove him otherwise, she asked. I said, take him to your roots for a month. Back to the old country, to the toilet on the street, different customs and life. Let him know from his own experience what it's like when you grow up. Make him participate in it, just like you, just so he can have a roof over his head and something to eat. The duration should be long enough for him to appreciate what you have done to give him the life he lives. If this doesn't work, then nothing will work, the church secretary came in and said. The police were here with my eldest son. He and his uncle were caught selling illegal substances. Adam could have been charged as an accessory after the crime. Looks like he was sitting in his uncle's car while he was inside buying weed. Adam looked deathly scared. I told the detective that his mother had custody of him and that he should be taken to her. I was under a court order to communicate with him, the pastor said. We can't. She was arrested today, along with Tony Landers. They're both in jail, he said. The best thing to do is call Judge Donalder, Dam, and ask him how he wants to handle this situation. I can't risk getting arrested for this, I replied. You can use my office to call him. Adam looked at me. Dad, it was a stupid mistake. I had no idea what Uncle Gordon was doing. We were at Grandma's, and he offered me a ride. Wait until she finds out her car is impounded. Anyway, you may have to appear in court since you're a minor and this is your first crime. You'll most likely be fined. Your association just kicked you in the, I explained. Plus, with your mother in jail, the judge will look at your actions more seriously. Dad, I'm telling the truth, Adam said. I believe you. I know you. The problem is that those you encounter don't know. How will you prove that you're telling the truth? You can't. Your mother's reputation is ruined with a court order against me. Even my reputation is in question. Let this be a lesson in life, learn from it. The only one who protects you is you. Try your best to think about it, the officer came out and said. He would take my son to the station, and they would keep an eye on him. After we met with the judge, he expects me to go to his office right away. During the trip, I called Sharon and explained what was happening. She said she would make a third bed when she got home. It took about an hour. The judge told me he called Social Security, who made me out to be a saint. Mary was depicted as a demon from hell. He didn't like it when I laughed. I couldn't stop. I thought it was funny what was happening. Pastor, I spoke with the police officer and convinced him to reconsider his intention to charge your son. The fact that the car belonged to his grandmother gives credibility to his words. We agreed that if this case goes to court, he will get off with a warning because he did not commit crimes. The policeman will make Adam report to him for several weeks. I think you are too generous in your offer to divide during the divorce. Her lawyer accepted it with gratitude. I approve of the divorce. Your lawyer will bring me the documents for approval, and we will do it officially tomorrow after the usual 90 days. Everything will be finalized. I will revoke the restraining order. Child custody will be decided when and if she gets out of jail. I thanked the judge and went to pick up my son. I wrote to Stephen asking him to find out the details regarding my ex-wife. When I arrived at the police station to pick up my son, I learned that my ex-wife had been taken to the hospital's psychiatric ward for 72 hours of observation. Before heading to our new home, we went back to pack some of my son's things. The house was in terrible condition. It appeared as if it had been searched during a robbery. Has your mother stopped taking her medication? I asked Adam. I don't know, Dad. I've been living with friends since the partition. I'd come back when I thought she wouldn't be home, just to change clothes and shower as needed, Adam replied. Even the maid you hired quit. We collected what seemed worthwhile and took it to the laundry for cleaning. I didn't even think about leaving this to Sharon or me. Dad, I stayed with Mom because of James. I knew he would need me to replace you, he said. Mom really became unstable after you left. I think she completely lost control after losing James. Tony didn't really understand. He was just a fool in love with a woman with money. Do you think Sharon will let me move in? I did wrong when she worked with you. I guess I believed my mom. Tell her in person when the opportunity arises what you just told me. I'm pretty sure I know what her answer will be. In all respects, son, we must deal with the problems we create directly, I said. Dad, in December, I'll be old enough to get my learner's license. The last few weeks have made me grow up a little. You're the one who kept the family together. I see it now. I was just too blind to see it. You think I could spend the rest of the summer working with Pastor Seth in youth ministry? Asked Adam. I was shocked and stopped the car, looking at him. I said, really? Why? I don't know if I want to dedicate my life to service like you, but it's something I'd like to explore before I close that door, he replied. I gave him my cell phone and told him to talk to Seth. I let them discuss the details. Seth was excited. I was pleased with the maturity my son showed. Getting off the phone, Adam said, Seth says I need to buy a couple of suits, or at least a jacket and pants, shirts and ties for formal church events. Jeans and a t-shirt are fine for social events. Never argue with Seth in public. If you disagree with something, ask him in private, just like you do with me. Open communication is important for a minister. Tact is your greatest, learn to use it like a pen to whom you are writing. You can say, lady, your looks would stop the clock, or you can say, lady, your looks make time stop. One will be taken as an insult, the other as a compliment. The only time it is appropriate to be unpleasant is when you're invited through the barn gate. Sharon was almost done with dinner when we got home. Paul and Cor picked up James and Johnny so we could talk while I was setting the table. Adam and Sharon had a private conversation. I knew everything went well because they were both smiling when they returned. I was amazed when Adam asked for an opportunity to pray before eating. He did it amazingly well. After dinner, I left them alone as I went to work on my sermon. I walked out of my home office to hear voices in the kitchen. Paul and Cora came to visit, our 3 sons. Adam, Paul asked, since you're about to get your learner's license, would you like to learn how to drive a tractor? Yes, I would like to, but we'll have to figure out a schedule because I'm going to be helping Pastor Seth at the youth ministry for the rest of the summer, I interjected. Dad, but he said I need to make arrangements with Seth on my own, Adam added. I'm looking forward to it. I'll meet you at work tomorrow after we pick up Johnny. We can go shopping so you can pick out the appropriate clothes you'll need. Remember, as you pick out clothes tomorrow, that you're representing not only your dad and the church, but God, Sharon said. The look on Adam's face was priceless. I never thought so, Adam admitted honestly. Paul and Cora laughed. Most people don't, Cora said. That's something that most parents don't teach anymore these days. Most of the people we deal with don't respect anyone or anything. However, they all respect your father. Big John stopped by the bookstore on Friday to tell me that a surprise engagement party was planned for Sunday after the service. I will decide if I want to tell Sharon that her parents will be attending Sunday service. They'll be coming with us, so we'll go in right before the service starts. Later, towards the end of the day, Stephen called me. It turns out that Maria and Tony were arrested for illegal wiretapping, theft of government property, and money laundering. The charges were filed by the state attorney general's office. Of course, both denied everything. I was doing routine bookkeeping in the office when one of the sales assistants brought me an envelope that she found lying on the coffee counter. It was addressed to me. There was a note inside. It said, both will get 10 years if you're lucky. Expect a donation to the church to cover their losses. Thanks again to my unknown friend Sean McKay. My sermon was well received, although I introduced a few unexpected twists. I did this to catch some people off guard. Oh, how that worked. It was about the blessings we take for granted. This gave many people food for thought. After finishing the sermon, I asked Pastor Seth to close with prayer. I told him our planned wedding date, asking if he would be honored to officiate the ceremony. He walked up to the pulpit as I came down and stood next to Sharon while the congregation sang. When we finished, he asked everyone to sit down. It's very rare for a pastor to say he's received unexpected blessings. It's even rarer for him to have 2 in 1 week, Seth said. David, Sharon, and Adam, please join me. We arrived on Friday. I received an unexpected phone call. It turns out that our pastor's son wanted to work with me in the youth ministry. His father wisely said that he needed to make arrangements with me on his own. I am pleased to announce that Adam McGregor will be my assistant for the rest of the summer. If he loves it, he may continue doing it part-time throughout the school year. The parishioners applauded. Secondly, I was told that David's divorce was approved. Sharon and David asked me to officiate their wedding on November 28th. It will take place right here. Everyone stood up and applauded. Seth then led us in prayer. Adam could be seen holding Sharon's other hand while praying with me. It took us a while to free ourselves. Everyone had questions. Big John waited until almost the end before telling Sharon and me about the surprise engagement party that had been thrown for us. He should have explained to Sharon that Marge had gone there ahead of time and would be there to meet us. It was a bring-your-own event with food to share. The Legion Hall was packed by the time we arrived. Before we walked in, Adam asked if he could take off his tie. I replied, taking mine off. Sharon then told him to unbutton the top 2 buttons of his shirt. We entered. I carried Johnny in my arms. Sharon and my sons walked with their arms around each other. The first thing we heard was, "They're here." Congratulations. We had to get through the food first before the rush started. I asked Sharon to go first. Marge walked over and picked up little Johnny and took him to Sharon's mom. I didn't know that this would be the first time she was holding him. It was a 200-meter trip for them, and they stayed with Marge while they were in town. We were sitting down at the table with our plates when Sharon looked at him. It took her several tries, but she found him. "Mom, Dad, what a surprise. What are you doing here?" she asked, approaching them. The room suddenly became quiet. Everyone knew their story and waited to see what would happen next. Sharon's father spoke. "John called me because he had a problem. The problem was that my daughter's future husband wanted to meet me. I asked John what kind of person he was. John said he was the best. Knowing John as we all do, I needed to see for myself. John didn't exaggerate this time. From what I heard, he even underestimated him. David, I'll be proud if you let me call you son." Sharon threw herself into his arms just as she had done when she was little. Someone shouted, "Open the bottles, the party has begun." All evening, our sons heard many compliments about how good they looked. Adam was amazed at the attention he received from girls his age. As soon as the music started, Sharon's father asked her to dance. "Give Johnny to me, Mom. I'll look after him while you're on the dance floor," Adam said. No matter what Adam said, Sharon spun around the dance floor with tears of joy in her eyes. John pulled me aside and poured me some cold beer. "We did it right, David." At the morning service today, Sharon's father, an old-fashioned Christian, watched your every move. He was very impressed with your sermon. He still didn't know who you were. Seeing the three of you at the end of the service, he was broken. He never expected this. He still can't believe that Sharon will become a pastor's wife, John said. Sharon's problem with her family is now history. Finally, I met her parents. Sharon and I invited them over for Sunday dinner. We went to Clark's, a family restaurant that serves good homemade food. When Sharon's mother found out how bad it was, she nearly lost her temper. Sharon and I didn't hide anything. My sons also contributed. We both learned a few things we didn't know before. By the end of dinner, everything was laid out on the table. It was made clear to me that there would be no more Mr. and Mrs. Johnston, just Mom and Dad. Psychologists and psychiatrists agreed that Maria was medically unfit to stand trial. She became suicidal and was admitted to a mental hospital. Her fall, I must admit, was the worst thing I have ever seen. Tony Landers didn't get 10 years, he got 15. I bought the apartments back when her lawyer put them up for sale with no down payment and such a low interest rate. I took out a 30-year mortgage, knowing that I would pay it off in 10. I hired the old property management team on the same terms as before. 6 months have passed since our wedding. Paul and Cora sold us 2 acres of land on the back corner of their 150-acre farm. We are busy building our new 6-room house. What do you think of our story today? I thought that this story was rather unaccustomed and unusual in relation to the previous stories. What's your impression? Write in the comments. See you in the comments.